Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I've got Pete with me, and we're going to be talking about the talent gap. But before I get to all of the questions that I've got for you, can you give everybody an introduction?
Yes, absolutely. Emma, this is a fantastic opportunity. I am Pete Kidd. I have been serving in the insurance industry for the last 12 years, working for multiple carriers. Currently, I am the Vice President of Insurance Operations for Leap Insurance, where our mission is to make renting more affordable through providing insurance and tech-enabled solutions to landlords in the single-family, multifamily, and student housing sector.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. We've been scheming about getting this interview actually scheduled since last year's Rise Awards when you were recognized as one of the 35 under 35. So I feel like great way to get things going here finally after all of this stuff.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's a fantastic opportunity. You really built a tremendous platform and you're serving as a vocal advocate for the insurance industry. So I'm privileged to be here and excited for the discussion.
So I want to tap into something you mentioned during your introduction, that you've been in the industry for about 12 years. So what is the one thing that you've continued to hear talked about over the course of those 12 years that for some reason we haven't seemed to find a solution or resolution for?
Yeah, the one thing that comes top of mind, and it's ironic that it's still a hot topic today, is the talent gap, right? It's this, us attracting and fostering young talent within the insurance industry so that we can deepen our bench strength. And somehow 12 years later, we're still discussing how we have a talent gap. And the Great Resignation was coming, but now it's here, right? The baby boomer mass exodus. I mean, we're going to have a talent deficit of probably 400,000 positions or so from what I've read in a couple of different reports. And, it's a severe problem that ultimately, we've communicated constantly and have heard, the potential risk that we're going to face when this time has come. And it's now here, right? And so this year, 2024, has actually been labeled as Peak 65. And for any of the listeners that wasn't aware of what Peak 65 is, it's essentially every day in this year, we are going to have the most amount of baby boomers turning age 65, which is typically your retirement age. I think the number was around 12,000 baby boomers a day will be turning 65. So, when you think about how much of our workforce is going to be aging out of our industry, in multiple industries, but specifically insurance and insurtech, the knowledge and the talent that's leaving, it's really going to exacerbate the issue of our talent gap. And so now we're sitting here as the next generation up and looking behind us for the next generation that's coming. And we are the ones that have to now solve the problem and figure out creative ways and solutions to fill this gap.
Isn't that kind of like the life of the millennial? All of these things that we've heard about and theoretically should have been getting fixed. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Here you go.
Right. It just dumps right on us. Right. So
yeah. And I actually hadn't heard that term Peak 65 before, but when you talk about it, it's almost mind-boggling to think about that many people getting to that point. And even if they're not retiring this year, that means somewhere in the next couple of years, I've heard that statistic, that 400,000 kind of shift a little bit from year to year, whether it was I think at one point it was 2025. So it was probably tied to that. Now it's a little bit more towards 2028, probably based off of some financial statistics of when people actually plan to retire. But you also mentioned this other idea in that response of okay, so now that we're in this spot and we're looking behind, what are you seeing with the talent gap in terms of, how do we support this? How do we start to move forward now that it's in our hands to reshape what our industry looks like and solve this issue once and for all?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. That's the question that keeps me up at night. Certainly building out teams and developing talent as a leader not only for myself, but for our organization, right? It's, I look at the landscape of the insurance industry, and it's a microcosm of everything that's going on in our economy, right? We've had a tremendous amount of layoffs in the last year, due to catastrophic losses and profitability goals not being met. And so there's a lot of shifting of prioritizations, but also company structures, right? And from my observations, what I've been starting to see more of, especially in the insurtech space, but I'll also say your large and middle market carriers as well, is, we're starting to see more of a decentralization of company structures, right? We're creating less silos and enabling flatter organizations, and creating this framework where we're able to equip skilled employees at every level with the aptitude to garner more global knowledge, right? And I think from a development standpoint, whether you're a individual contributor or first line, second line, third line leader, I think if everyone is able to think on a global scale, we're able to understand the value chain proposition of our insurance organization, and therefore the development and outlook of our organization and the talent continues to further, right? Just like any other industry, right? I look at insurance as almost similar to sports organizations. I have a background in playing baseball in college, so my mind tends to shift there. But the goal of any organization, you want to find talent early, you want to develop the talent, and then you want to produce the most highly effective teams. And so, within the industry, within our organizations, there has to be a socialization of the industry and changing the narrative and changing the perception of what our industry is, right? I've even fell a victim to, when I tell my story, my age old story is, I fell into the insurance industry. And though that is the case, right, I wasn't really aware of what the insurance industry had to offer. I was just a college kid that needed a job. But then when I got into the industry and I aligned myself with mentors, and I was really able to understand all of the different aspects of insurance and all of the different variables that this beautiful industry has to offer, this became less of a job and more of a career. And I think it's our duty to be advocates of this career path and showcasing that. And then the other aspect of it too, which is a more deeply rooted aspect of attracting the talent. I think it's an evolution of recruitment, right? I think talent acquisition for most organizations do a tremendous job in the sense of when they get the talent in, we're able to develop them. But, with again, the social demographic changing of students going to college and what that looks like with post-secondary education and the cost of everything, right? We have to figure out a way to tap into talent earlier than college, right? Getting rooted into some of the enrichment programs that are tied to communities, tied to high schools. I think that's a good way to start educating people, younger people, about what this industry truly has to offer, right? And then I think from there, that's where you start getting the early entry into our current industry, and we can develop and foster and have talent that is excited about their career path, within this industry. And then the last thing I'll say is really just, of course, technology, right? I mean, this is the emergence of technology. Insurance is starting to catch wind with that. We've been behind for quite some time on the evolution and growth of technology, but with this AI boom, I think we're really trying to find ways to create the bridge to transfer the knowledge from the baby boomer generation and those that have tenure and experiences, and build out training programs and platforms that are able to quickly have the people that are coming in without the knowledge build that up and skill up very quickly.
I love the idea of like thinking about recruiting earlier and differently. I think that that's a really important thing. And I also think you're coming at my heart when you start talking about changing the perception of the insurance industry, because that's like probably as we head into next year, my biggest soapbox that I'll be standing on and shouting from all
Yeah,
the
and
time.
I mean, to add to that, right? I mean, there tends to be a thought of, even myself, right? I try to advocate for insurance, and everyone that knows me in my personal life, they know that I work in insurance. But the first question that I always get is, well, do you sell it? And look, agents and brokers are the heart of insurance, right? So there's no shade here to that segment of the business, but there's so many other aspects to
Mhm.
insurance. And so it really is a challenge to change that perception and that lens of what is it like to work in the insurance industry. And so, I tried my best to be an advocate for that and educating people on all of those aspects, and people that I mentor, whether they're in the industry or not, and sharing that information.
Before I ask my last question to you, that just kind of like jogged my memory of a conversation that I had a while back with someone from American Family who's local to the Madison area where I am. And they were talking about the fact that they had had like a career day and they had a bunch of high schoolers come in and they were talking to them about like all of the things that are like exciting about, in their perception, exciting about insurance. So they had like people from marketing come and talk, and HR and sales. And finally they said that one of the high school students like raised their hand and was like, are you gonna like talk to us about like any of the careers that are actually associated with insurance and like the actual nuts and bolts of claims and new business and these things that are like so integral to our industry, that they had the thought process of like, these kids aren't going to want to learn about that because it's not like sexy enough. So let's put forward like the flashy parts of what we do. And so I always, whenever I think about this, I'm like, we are too hard on ourselves within the industry that we're not sharing those stories enough. And so I love that you touched on that idea, and it kind of like jogged my memory of that conversation.
Absolutely, and I would even take it a step further. Right? Is when we're thinking about, okay, job fairs, and I remember when I was in college, they would have all of the companies come, and most of the people that were at the job fairs were the talent acquisition department. And to your point, they're advocating for all of the opportunities and talking about the sexy job titles that may attract some of that talent, but I would argue to say maybe it's time to shift that and actually have people that are doing the job also be a part of the recruiting process, right? Because I
Mhm.
think the best way to get knowledge on the job is to talk to people that are doing the job. And it can be an informal mentorship that you develop with a college student or with a high school student, just from that one interaction, and sharing information with them.
Yeah. So before we round out our time together, you gave some really good insights into what we should be doing at an industry level. And so now I want to kind of like shift it a little bit and ask you specifically, what advice do you have for other people that are in your shoes that are working on trying to develop the team that they have in-house? Maybe beyond leveraging technology to fill some of that like institutional knowledge gap, but like what else, what other tips or suggestions do you have for the folks that are living in your shoes day in and day out?
Yeah, look, the main thing that I learned from one of my mentors, right, was to be vocal. And as a leader, you're role modeling every single day, right? And so I think when you have the open door policy, even in the remote space, of allowing your people to be vocal about what it is that they're desiring out of their career, I think that's where you start to garner a lot more excitement into the potential path that they have, right? I mean, you have to express your interest in promotions, in career development, and growth. There's a mindset that we tend to have is, we put our head down, we're going to work really hard, and they'll find me. The promotions will find me. The career development will find me. And that's not necessarily always the case, And so I think if you as a leader are creating a continuously developing and thriving environment and a welcoming environment for your staff to feel as though they can come to you and speak about what it is that they want out of their career. Or even if they're not coming to you, you're probing them to think about it. You're asking the questions in their one-on-ones. I think that really sparks a lot of the again, excitement and engagement of what it is that they want to do out of the career. And it gives you a way to give them exposure, right? I may have an employee who is working on the claim side, but for some odd reason, they may have a interest in actuary or they're a numbers person. And so I can align them in a different route or a different path. I may have someone who wants to be a leader. And so that helps me tailor my development plan with them specific to what it is that they want. But without, speaking up and being vocal, it's really hard to understand, what it is that your people want and how you can truly support them in all of their dreams and desires that they're looking for. And then I would say, just as a leader, you heard me say it earlier, but being an advocate for the insurance industry every day and everything that we do is truly the best way that I think we can inspire, the people that we are leading, and garnering experience. Again, as much experience that you can get in multiple aspects of the value chain and understanding how your role impacts the company globally, and having that desire, that thirst for knowledge. I tend to look up articles and read things, and even in sectors that are not necessarily in my realm of business, I'm trying to understand and learn and take from different lines of business, whether it's workers' comp or general liability or whatever the case may be, so that I can be a much more equipped insurance professional. The other aspect too, I would say, is, of course, the insurance certifications and designations, whether it's a CPCU or AIC or whatever that may be for you in the path that you're on. The education that you can acquire through different certifications is definitely valuable. And the last thing that I would mention is being intentional about mentorship, whether you're serving as a mentee or a mentor. Having those very difficult conversations when you're at that point in your career of a pivot, right? A fork in the road, and you're having people that you can have as a board of advisors help you navigate some of the challenges that you may be facing, but also give you some outlook on the different opportunities that you may have not been aware of within the insurance industry. And of course, your job as a leader is to pay that forward, right? And so you reach back and you give that information to not only your team, but your mentees, informal, formal, and that all will help foster more talent, foster and keep more talent within our industry, because it is a dire need, right? This problem that we have with the talent gap and the resignation of baby boomers, is as much of their contributions has really shifted our industry. It's now our job to move that forward. And so we're obligated to do all of these things.
Thank you so much for joining me for the conversation, Pete. And for anybody that's not, make sure you make your way over and give him a follow, and let either one of us know if you've got any questions. I think we could probably go on and on about this topic for some time. So maybe we'll have you on for a live episode or something along this topic as we continue on in 2024. But thank you again so much for joining me, and everybody for watching, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.